What is going on, everybody? Welcome to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my thoughts for Never Let Go. This is the latest film by director Alexandre Aja. This one stars Halle Berry and tells the story of a mother and her two young sons who live in isolation all by themselves out in the middle of the woods, and they are surrounded by this evil presence. And they go out into the woods and they tie themselves to these ropes. And these ropes are the lifeline that they have to keep them safe from this evil. Eventually, their safety and surroundings come into question when one of the sons, Nolan, begins to question his mother's rules and question whether or not the evil presence is real. Aja is a filmmaker. I haven't seen everything he's made, but of the films that I have seen, I think he's a good filmmaker. He's a competent filmmaker. I've been more positive on the films of his that I've seen. Nothing he's made, though, has completely blown me away. And so I went into this one with more measured expectations. Some of the best parts about it, though, are I think the performances overall are pretty strong. You know, Halle Berry she's good. She does a good job as the motherly role, and I'll kind of get into a little bit more of her performance a little bit later on in my review. But I thought for the most part, too, the two young kids, Nolan and Samuel, they do a pretty good job as well. There are some moments that are more emotional and dramatic where I feel like they come across quite well and quite convincing. There's a couple other moments that aren't super strong, but overall, I think they do a pretty good job. I like the setup here for the most part. I like kind of the isolated single location type film. It's always interesting to kind of see what a director is able to do with this sort of limitation of just sticking to one single location. And this is a film that elements of it feel familiar. We've kind of been down these roads before. Horror movies have certainly dealt with similar things and taken similar directions as the story does in Never Let Go. And so while it is competently made, it does have kind of that familiarity feel to it. It doesn't do anything super memorable, I don't think, that really sets itself apart and elevates itself to the next level. What it does, it executes well enough, but again, it doesn't really separate itself from other films that have kind of gone down and dealt with similar territory and gone down similar roads kind of thing as this film does. And I felt that the film was kind of lacking in scares. And it's maybe not necessarily a film that's contingent on typical scares. It's a little more built on the atmosphere. And the atmosphere here, it's pretty good. You know, it kind of has that isolated atmosphere, that sense of dread and despair and things like that. A lot of the atmosphere is built from this domestic turmoil that kind of, develops throughout the situation. And all of that is fairly well executed, the atmosphere. But again, it kind of just feels like it's lacking in horror and in scares. It just didn't land with the impact that I would have wanted it to. And Never Let Go is a bit of an odd one because it's a film that I think its potential greatest strength is also its potential kind of greatest weakness. Because really it all has to come down to how you interpret this story. This is very clearly a story that is, supposed to be kind of metaphorical and symbolic. And so the whole situation can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. Is this a story about mental health and the mom's deteriorating mental health? And is the real horror coming from the inside of the house as these children are now witnessing and really being subjected to her deteriorating mental health, which in some instances kind of leads to some sort of, child neglect and abuse and things like that. So that's kind of one way you could interpret the story. And so you can kind of choose to interpret everything that's happening in a very literal way, or you can interpret it more in a symbolic way, that it's ultimately about a mother's mental health or an abusive parent, or even parents raising up children with kind of unhealthy or radicalized ideologies and things like that, about instilling fear and control over your children and within your household kind of thing. And so there's a lot going on here. None of it is especially clear. And so there is some ambiguity to it, which I appreciate. But at the same time, I think that can cause it to become a bit jumbled and a little bit confusing, especially as it builds towards the climax and then ultimately how the film ends. I still overall enjoyed the journey of the film pretty well. I liked the ambiguity there. I think it has a couple pretty good tense moments, a couple shocking, kind of unpredictable moments that definitely kind of add to the tension and kind of the craziness of the situation that I think work pretty well. But like I said, depending on how you interpret it, it can lead to problems with how the film ends. And I'm not going to get into any spoilers, but I feel like based on how the film ends, it almost kind of falls apart under its own kind of internal logic, where there is a picture that you see towards the end of the film, and then based on what information you get from that picture and based on how the film ends, I feel like some things don't quite make sense. And this is a film too that I almost feel like the story is stretched a bit too thin, because it's pretty clear what they were going for from the very beginning of the movie, that this is something that could be interpreted in a very symbolic sort of way. You kind of get that point from the beginning. And so the film just kind of takes you through that all the way until the end of the movie. And you're kind of like, okay, I see what they're going for. There's maybe a few different ways we can interpret it. It gets a little jumbled. It's not super clear, which I appreciate the ambiguity, but it kind of doesn't totally fully come together. And then by the time you get to the end, and some of the things that happen at the end, I'm like, I don't know if this story fully kind of holds up under its own logic that it's built. And so, yeah, this is one that overall, I'm still a little bit more on the positive side. I had a pretty good experience with it overall, even though I do have some issues with it. And I don't know, this is one too that, you know, the last film I reviewed on my channel was The Substance, which is like a movie I had an incredible experience with, and it was kind of this emotional roller coaster ride. And maybe I'm still kind of riding high from that movie to where anything else I was going to watch after it, at least the next couple movies, are kind of at a disadvantage because nothing is going to quite, you know, hit the levels that movie did. And it just so happens that Never Let Go is the film that I just watch after The Substance. And so it's just like, you know, sorry, man, it's just not going to live up to that type of experience. So maybe there's a little bit of that in there. But anyways, overall, though, it's a film, I think it's pretty good, but again, it doesn't do anything super noteworthy or memorable. I'm going to be a 6 out of 10 for Never Let Me Go. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below though. Very curious to hear your thoughts. I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts on how you kind of interpreted the film. You know, what did you see it as a metaphor or symbolic for? And what did you think of the ending? Do you think it makes sense? And, you know, did you like how it all came together? So yeah, would be interested in hearing from you. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. Like always, if you got anything out of this video, go ahead and do me a favor and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.